Hello everyone, Snurgles here. Alan Wake is a game that came out in 2010 on the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, it's a pile of dookie crap. I absolutely do not like it. I hate it. It should go burn in hell for all I care. It's all good. I'll explain my reasonings behind everything in today's episode of JP's Guide to Alan Wake. Let's begin. So Alan Wake to me is like that time you decided to go to your uncle's house and he was having a schizo attack, so you kept screaming nightmare, 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 nightmare to his face, and eventually he flew out the third-story window. Alan Wake is just a very dark told tale about this guy named Alan who's, oh no, a troubled writer from New York with $1 million in his bank account. Oh, good heavens. Oh, that's terrible. Oh my god, I wish he would just kill himself. And that takes us to the beginning of our story where Alan is in a dark place after a car accident. Having 4 beers apparently in driving is just a skill issue for this man. He then makes it out of the car, and you're put into a tutorial where it's pretty much you just learning the game. You learn how the pistols work, all the ammunition, and you also learn what light does to the enemies. Honestly, this feels like you're trying to hunt down a bunch of college students, and for fear that they're going to die if any sort of rays hit their skin, they just cower in fear, and then you can shoot them, just like real college students. Alan then reaches a lighthouse, where he then takes his schizo medication and finally wakes up in a fantasy with him and a wife going to a small, quiet mountain village somewhere in Montana. And this is where our story really begins. So I still have no clue why he was in this town whatsoever. I think the reason is because he wanted to get away from the big city as, oh no, all troubled writers want to get away from the big city. Oh, I hate it so much. I chose to live in this place that I absolutely hate. Why do you live in New York, man? That's terrible. Move somewhere else. You know what? In fact, don't move somewhere else. Just die, Alan. I don't like you. He makes his way through the diner, eventually stumbling across an old lady who gives him no wisdom, no advice, no nothing, and is just hanging out in the back. He also meets a lady who is obsessed with lights and doesn't like darkness. A little hint later. Hint, hint, not nudge. She comes up later. Yeah, she will. She's one of the main characters in this for some reason. Alan then goes up to the cabin with his wife Alice, and then he basically complains, and then leaves, and then the darkness swallows up his wife, and then he wakes up in a car accident. Again, man. Get some skill while drinking and driving. Alan then, in a normal civilized world where everyone is chasing him and attacking him just like real Montana rednecks, he has to now find his way to the nearest gas station in order to find help. He eventually gets there, and that is the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Alan tries to get help from the police, but of course, because he's on his schizo medications again, the world seems scary. They want to try to help him and want to try to get him away from all these problems and find his wife. Don't listen to them, Alan. They're trying to convince you that there's not shadow men trying to attack you at every place. Run, 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 run. He then gets a tip from someone who claims to have kidnapped Alice. A little bit weird considering she drowned to death, and Alan, that is all your fault. You did this. You brought this upon yourself. So he then goes on his own to Lover's Peak to try to find the kidnapper and try to get Alice back. But on the way, Alan gets tired because he doesn't care about his bitch-ass wife, and eventually, the kidnapper demands that in an exchange for his wife, he demands the manuscript. The manuscript is, I have no clue. They just make some shit up. Maybe he has to write some R34 Sonic fanfic for him or something. So Alan then, in a desperate attempt, goes back to an ancient-ass typewriter. They have phones in this world. What the fuck is he doing with a typewriter? Bro's living in 1955, trying to write a graphic novel about anything in the future. I can see why his marriage isn't working. So Alan tries to finish up the manuscript, and that is the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 begins, and something's off. Barry and Alan go to find this person named Rose, who is under the spell or hypnosis of some evil creature. I have no clue who. Eventually, they get knocked out by Rufy, and the FBI finally show up to probably shoot someone. This guy is unhinged. Alan, being the incredible fucking loser, dumbass waste of sperm he is, decides to make a run from the FBI, as all rational, intellectual people do, and tries to escape through the woods. Eventually, he reaches the radio tower where the FBI again comes up and is trying to just shoot him. He is willingly going calm and trying to explain the situation, and they're just open firing on him. It is crazy. And eventually, he does escape. The kidnapper, of course, with his brain immediately being higher IQ than Einstein, decides, hey, let's go meet at the coal mine instead. So Alan goes to the coal mine, waits at the coal mine. Nothing happens at the coal mine. And the kidnapper then says, alright, so that was kind of a fucky scary place that I put myself into. Let's go meet somewhere else. Alan says, holy shit, I'm going to strangle you with piano wire. But he has no other choice because the kidnapper kind of holds all the power in this situation. So he then tries to go to the next place where the kidnapper says he'll be. Eventually, Alan does find the kidnapper, but Darkness is very angry. Apparently, Alan is not on Santa's nice list, and the Darkness destroys, like absolutely cripples the kidnapper. He totally deserves it. And Alan makes a heroic dive into the water, and that is the end of Chapter 3. Chapter 4 begins with Alan again waking up in a hysteria in a nightmare situation. He is now in a hospital, and the doctor is trying to calm him, claiming that his wife is actually dead, and none of this is real, and he's going into a state of delusion because his wife is dead. Certainly not because Alan wouldn't be in a state of delusion if his wife was dead, because then all of his problems would be solved. Of course, the Darkness then comes over, and Alan escapes the hospital in a schizo rage. Alan then escapes the hospital in an unschizo rage in the real world where dark people are trying to kill him. He then goes to a farm where two old men told him that there's going to be some hooba-majigga that's going to help him in his task. So in the farm comes an actually really cool fight scene. Let me be real here. The fight scene is very cool. It's an entire concert done in a fight scene where you're battling against the Shadow Men, but there's tons of music, fireworks, and other lights that go off. It's very cool. They then realize that taking the advice of two drunk old wife beaters is probably the best advice that they could ever get, almost as good as the new Twitch meta, which leads them to having nothing to do except to drink and go into a drunken slumber. And that is the end of Chapter 4. Chapter 5 begins with them finally getting arrested for all the dark deeds they have committed, and the FBI agent, who again is probably some paranoid school threat that couldn't shoot up his school, so they decided to make him an FBI officer. Eventually, Darkness does kill him. Thank God, I hated him so much, almost as much as I hate Alan and Barry. And then eventually the police officer finally says, holy shit, Alan, you're right. Your schizo ramblings weren't just schizo ramblings. And Alan was saying, yes, I'm correct. Now hurry up. They then try to find Alan a way to a helicopter? In a town like this, getting funding for a helicopter, they must be sucking dick on the side in order to afford something like that. Something else happens where Alan goes into the, like I said before, the woman who likes to shine everything up. She finally makes the appearance. The Super Smash Bros. Ultimate final character reveal is here. She then takes Alan and the gang down to her cellar, where it's all filled with lights and it's all cozy, wonderful, and awesome, and gives Alan a clicker. I still have no clue what the clicker does, but that is the end of Chapter 5. Chapter 6 is the most simply written chapter ever. George Orwell's 1984. This has nothing to do with the video. I'm just plugging in George Orwell's 1984. What is a better book than this, though, is the Fallout 4 manual. It is so much better, contains more information than all of this put together, and somehow has a more cohesive story. So, with the clicker in hand, Alan then goes to the cabin so he can rewrite the story and make sure that he makes out of this horror scenario alive. And with the conclusion in hand, he then writes the hardest ending line that I've ever heard. It made me cream 4 times. This.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Ugh! And now you might be thinking, well, Snurgles, there's actually 2 DLCs. I played the DLCs. They are just more of the same game, except Alan finds himself, which I thought he already found himself, and I thought he already rewrote the story, but apparently he didn't, and he has to go through this entire situation yet again. It's just a whole lot of nothing. I believe the DLC wasn't made for story purposes. It was just made to see what kind of cool situations that they could put the character in. And you know what, to be fair, yeah, the DLCs do have some fun scenarios that you run through with the different words and the different kind of blocks and all these other environments clashing together. It's kind of cool. But now with all that said, that is going to be the end of the game. Now, my main complaints about this game are going to be the combat, the aiming, the enemies, and the visuals. So, let's start with the first one, the combat. The combat is fucking slow. Alan Wake is such a slow, horribly moving character. My piss stream when I have kidney stones runs smoother and faster than Alan Wake does. You can't get away from enemies. They always have the first move on you. And I have this complaint as well with Call of Duty Zombies Black Ops 4. If you don't know, in Black Ops 3, the movement of zombies was very good. You can outrun them and there's ways around the zombies. But in Black Ops 4, the zombies are way too fast and it's hard to avoid them, and it makes it feel like every time you get hit in that game, it's cheating. cheap, it's unfair, and you don't deserve it. It's the same with this game. It feels unfair every time you get hit. It feels like you had no chance, no movement, and the game was rigged from the start for you to die. And last but not least, the game visuals. So this might be because I'm playing on the Xbox 360 version, or like the PC version of that version, which is in 2010, and the game obviously doesn't hold out. There is a remastered version, but I didn't have access to that version, so I had to play this one. Those aren't necessarily the graphics that I'm talking about that are awful. It's more of the blurring effects in the dark areas that make the game just awful to look at. So you could technically do... Wow. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm looking at because the game is so blurred, and when I'm trying to hit an enemy, it does not help when the entire game is warping every which way I go. And with that said, I'd give Alan Wake a solid 6 out of 10. Pretty good game, but the combat, man, just how long it takes for you to go any place and to do anything, and how cheap it is for the enemies to hit you. With all this, a solid 6 out of 10 for Alan Wake. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy, and I will see you all in another video or live stream. Goodbye.